let's talk about wire fraud on this slide. So when you ask that question, do I have coverage for wire fraud to your carrier? Talk us through that a little bit. Like, how do they really make sure that there is coverage, or how does that question get answered with nuance that our listeners need to be prepared to understand?
John, let me answer this question. Let me go first because I spent hours last night practicing on how to answer this question. I made my wife and my son, who's home from college, listen to my eloquent answer. And here it is. There is no coverage for wire fraud from the insurance industry. There's no coverage. You have to, so that was my answer that I practiced. You can't buy it. We've paid out millions of dollars from 2016 to 2020, as have all the other carriers in this space, and it's not insurable anymore. You might have that agent who you're friends with at church. They might think, we have some very sexy endorsements called electronic funds transfer rider, social engineering rider, computer crime rider, computer manipulation rider. There's so many that sound like they cover wire fraud. Trust me, we insure more title agents, attorney agents, mortgage bankers than anybody. There's no coverage for this from the insurance perspective. You might think you do, but you don't. There's so many tricks and so many things that you need to do to get coverage that if you did those things, you wouldn't have had that loss. Do not rely on the insurance industry to cover it because they just don't. I would love to say they do, but they don't. You've got to partner with a technology company.
Maybe this is nuanced, but I feel like I learn something every time I talk to you guys. And when we think about cyber, especially, I think that this is on the minds of a lot of our, viewers, given the amount of system outages that we've seen across the industry due to some form of cyber attack in the last, call it, 3 months. When is a cyber policy triggered, or when is it considered a hack versus is there negligence in the way that a team is either keeping their system secure, or if somebody clicks on a phishing email, is that considered a hack, or is that considered negligence of the team not being educated to, protect themselves? Just curious of where those either overlap or are completely separate.
Those would be covered under a cyber policy, both those situations. But if it's a situation that the industry continues to be negligent, then you probably are going to see an exclusion down the road for that situation. But both of those situations would be covered under cyber policy.
And at the end of the day, when you use the word hack, that vernacular covers an enormous number of different breaches, compromises, and things. Because when you start talking about hacking the computer, that is considerably more difficult, although the hackers can do it, than hacking an individual, which is convincing them to click on that link for a Starbucks gift certificate or whatever, or those pictures they want to see from the bachelor party, or whatever is their blind spot, because everybody's got a blind spot. It'll be different for everybody. I don't begin to pretend, that I don't have one, because I'm sure I do.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, because I think that that's where, especially in our world, from a certified point of view, we really look at more and more people getting tricked, getting socially engineered, right? And then that leads then to funds getting sent to a fraudulent party. And so that's where it is interesting to think about, really understanding your policies to make sure that you are covered in those sorts of scenarios, or you're not, and understand why you would then need, some sort of other supplemental process or procedure or technology to help keep you safe. But that's super helpful, especially in understanding, what cyber typically does cover.
And Tyler, one other thing too, that the cautionary tale that I said about understanding your policy and having a good relationship with your agent or agency, that's not just a once in a lifetime thing. That is on renewal, because the underwriters continually learning more. The fraudsters are getting more advanced, more educated on our protections around it, and they are these things keep evolving. And just because it was true in 2015 does not mean it's true in 2024. Whatever even an accurate belief from 2015 could be mistaken today.
All right. So the first question, Max, how do we stop fraud and scams?
Yeah, the ultimate question, maybe for a lot of folks when dealing with our software and why you can come to talk to us and pursue just the ability to help stop fraud, prevent it. I really want to back up though, because I really think the important question here is like, where is the source of fraud and scams? Not the individuals, but like, what is this in self and the relationships that we have with our customers and with other individuals out in the market? And it really comes back to trust. The way that frauds and scam work normally is they're exploiting trust. So we have relationships with our customers and they have relationships with their real estate agents and other individuals in our industry. Those relationships, there's just implicit trust there, right? We're all humans. We utilize trust on a daily basis just to navigate the world and get through our lives and be able to continue on and be happy, right? The problem is that there are individuals who exploit that. So it's an unquestioned part of, our own relationships and our own business dealings sometimes where we trust too much maybe, or we trust enough and people exploit that. And that's really at the source of fraud and scams and how trust operates. So I think actually we'll talk about this right here with cybersecurity. And I can better explain this, right? So
Cool.
we put the question, another way to maybe ask the question on the other side of that statement is like, how do we just get rid of the risk of fraud entirely, right? Is there something we can buy, one solution we have, whatever? And I think of examples in cybersecurity or methodologies. One is this idea of zero trust, right? You'll hear this phrase a lot. People don't actually know what it means. If you're a cybersecurity expert, you understand the nuance here. But someone might hear something like zero trust and they would say, yeah, we just remove the trust from their relationships, right? We just say that there is no trust at every interaction, at every dealing, at every email. We make every individual authenticate and authorize that they should be a part of this. And I won't drag you into like the details of authentication and authorization, but let's just say at every interaction, I'm going to make you say, prove to me you're Tyler Adams and that this is your email and this is your phone number and show me your ID every single time we talk. That's just not tenable in most cases, right? So in terms of cybersecurity, zero trust as a method works in a way. It's just not an entire solution. There's no way you could have an entire real estate deal implement something like this, where every interaction between every individual involved requires that they're constantly proving who they are and that they should be a part of this.
That sounds painful.
Yeah, and as you know, and this goes back to the analogy with like the Google problem, right? To just look at that one for a second. So one way you would say, oh, I know how to solve the Google problem of people getting access, people letting other people in without actually belonging there. We'll put a turnstile at every access point. And you're like, okay, great. There's a lot of access points. There's shared stairwells in that building. There's other scenarios where you just can't put a turnstile there. And so you're going to put a bunch of turnstiles there to try and prohibit this. Maybe you slow it down, but you're not going to totally prevent it, right? Which leads us to sort of the second point here, which is like, you can't have just one method. You've got to have a strategy that has a lot of different layers to it. In cybersecurity, they call this the Swiss cheese model. Our own head of security here, educated our whole company about this, right? And the idea is you need to be able to have multiple layers inside of your security, fraud prevention, and your relationships with your customers and your partners, so that not any one layer is just going to stop everything. You have different layers that create friction or stop stuff, and that's actually more effective. It's a much better way to manage your own security and fraud prevention.
You make the title and settlement industry, feel like it used to. I mean, I feel like we all joined the industry quite a number of years ago, as did probably many of our listeners, when we all knew that we had to become experts in title stuff, and we are, and we are hardcore title folks. We know our easements and our covenants and our mortgages, and unfortunately, where we found ourselves here in March 2024 is that moving other people's money around and their private information has become the most important and highest risk thing that we do all day, every day. It's gotten to that kind of a scary place where moving money is the highest risk item we deal with versus dealing with mortgages and covenants and restrictions and all the other things that we consider ourselves experts at. I mean, I know that I didn't go to law school or join the title industry to become a professional wirer and figure out how to safely move money and personal information for that matter. But that's where we're at. And, you know, in order to be able to keep our company, our customers, our agents, and our industry safe and safer than they were yesterday, it needs the skills and talents of everybody. It's an all hands on deck kind of a game. And you know, given what you heard Liz and Elizabeth talk about as their background and their roles, all of those skills and talents are necessary.
I think it's important to take the next step then too, right? If we don't have coverage, who else probably doesn't have coverage for these situations that we deal with every single day, right? So when we have the conversation, when we do our own, as an agent, we do our own rapid response plan. Are you having conversations with your realtor partners about what they are doing? What is their plan going to be? What is in your industry? What is your response plan? Because that dovetails into our response plan, right? If our partner in the transaction is the first person that gets the call, right? We want them to know what they need to do to stop it. Are we talking with our industry partners about their own, what they're going to do on their worst day? Because that can affect our worst day. Because again, we know this, 24 to 72 hours, we get everyone on board and have those conversations. Same thing for what Liz does, the data breach. If they have that, what are they going to do?
What is involved in establishing an identity as we think about it?
Yeah, and I think what you shared is, Tom, is it spot on. The days of just physically looking at either that piece of plastic or even an image. I mean, I just purchased a piece of property in another state and last year, and I was, hey, just send us an image of your ID, and that was really all there was to it. So it's really moving beyond those manual reviews. And I like what Matt was saying. It's about the different data sources that are now available. You know, again, what we do is help make sure that that piece of plastic or that identity is in fact genuine, because the fakes that are out on the market that the criminals use from overseas are of such high quality, even law enforcement officials cannot tell by looking at them. They have the holograms. They use the same plastic that the DMVs use. I mean, the same inks. They have the signatures. We have 28 state law enforcement agencies that use us in the field, even though they can run an ID through dispatch because they can no longer tell looking at it. And these are trained law enforcement. So when you think about that and then go, well, how's any type of associate or employee supposed to be able to look and tell? It's really impossible to do. And because the criminals now are using data that's available from the dark web, it's, you know, last year alone, 353 million records were breached again online, and this has been ongoing since 2017. Criminals no longer have to try to make up an identity. All they need to do is go online, find someone that has a 700 credit score or higher. They can get their name, driver's license number, date of birth, social security, all their account information. They are now impersonating that person as long as they have a fake ID that has that victim's information on it, but it has their picture on it. That's how easy it is for them. And then when you have the issue where IDs, these fake IDs are really hard when you look at them to distinguish is it real or genuine or fake, that's where the problem is. And so the impersonation due to the data that's available on the dark web, and that's why I liked what Matt was saying, you now have to start pulling from multiple data sources. Even what we do, is the ID real? Now we use authoritative data sources instead of just looking at the image of the ID or looking at the ID through a photo. There are things that we're able to tell directly from our relationships with the agencies that produce those IDs that help us provide more accuracy and trust. But then it goes beyond that, especially in this world, like you said, where no one's doing these things in an office anymore. A lot of the time it's being done remotely. Now there's additional things that can be provided, additional data sources around can you trust that that person owns that ID? Even if it's a valid ID, do they actually own that? And that's where some different things with biometrics, facial selfie can come in. But then other things about where are they coming from? If they're supposed to be doing the transaction in Florida, but their IP shows they're in California, that could be a flag. If the device is a suspicious device that's had a SIM card swap or, suspicious behavior on it, there's different things and different data sources now that criminals do not have access to that can be part of that comprehensive, trusting the identity of someone that you're trying to do business with. Doing all this without trying to make your good customers feel like fraudsters because you're putting them through such a friction-filled process at the same time.
How is AI continuing to change the landscape is probably a better way to phrase that question.
Yeah, I think you're right in continuing, because it has been for a while now, but everyone between the different AIs that are available and how readily available they are, which is even scarier, just how instant you can have information. You can have a video created instantly. You can have an image of a driver's license created instantly, all through AI. That is, again, more to it's causing an issue for the traditional services that all they're doing is verifying images. They're just making sure that, hey, this looks genuine. This looks to be like an ID from Florida, or this looks to be a passport from. It has everything that looks correct. The difference is you need to deploy solutions that are no longer just looking at images. They're actually digging into the data behind those images to make sure, hey, let's make sure, even though it's an image of an ID, was that an ID that was captured live during a process or was just uploaded? AI gives these criminals the ability, especially if some systems out there are a little lazy, hey, just upload anything and we're going to trust it, versus no, even during the process of you doing that, let's say ID verification, we're going to do these checks during that process to make sure that's a live image. It's not a photo. It's not something that was just reproduced, that they've got a photo of something laying on their countertop on their sink. And even the selfie facial biometrics that can go into play. There's ways of preventing the AI attacks that take place, but it does take additional ways of doing those checks at the same time, instead of just upload something and we're going to look at it and tell you if we think it's right or not.
I've been in the industry for a very long time. I started as, a toddler. So I've been here through the growth of our company and the growth of technology that's used in this industry. Because when I joined Nightberry, I just wanted to help people buy houses and be a closer and have that, dream of home ownership. And here we are talking about geolocation and all of these other technological things that I have still don't even know half of what it all is. The seller impersonation fraud journey here at Nightberry started about 2 years ago, as it has been around for years. And it continues, and it will continue, and it will continue to adapt and evolve. And our responsibility is to be ready for that change and to pivot to what is next, because the fraudsters are just going to keep getting smarter. We have to talk to our sellers in our transactions. We have to talk to our buyers as well to know that we're the title company. We're the persons that they're going to be dealing with through the transaction. And having that direct communication with the parties in the transaction is absolutely critical. Nobody has time to wait and go through to find out if this is a real deal or not. We don't have time. We have real deals that we actually do want to close, and we have realtors that have sellers that they have met with and will bring to the office in person to sign documents. So our goal always is to just stop it as very soon at the very beginning as possible.
The most important aspect in trying to recover money is speed. Speed meaning how quickly can you get this information, the wiring coordinates to law enforcement, to federal law enforcement, to the FBI, to the Secret Service. There's two ways that this actually takes place. The first is through FinCEN has a financial fraud kill chain. So information, you lost $200,000, you send it to one of the federal law enforcement agencies, they get it to FinCEN, and then FinCEN arranges for the communications between the sending and the recipient bank in order to get the money returned back to the sending bank. It has to be within 72 hours, or they won't even do it. Typically, what we saw is the success rate after 24 hours goes down into the low single digits. So it has to be within 24 hours. So what the quote unquote secret sauce of the GIOC is it's not just waiting and forwarding information on to FinCEN. It's having a very robust network of like-minded financial investigators at financial institutions around the world that you can pick up the phone and call 24/7, 365 and say, hey, I just got information that money went from this account to this account. Here's the information. Can you take a look at it and freeze the money, hold the money? So typically what'll happen would be is if the service gets a call, FBI gets a call, they'll do the financial fraud kill chain, but then they'll also call in a bank investigator, give them the information and say, hey, yeah, look into this. And you might find evidence of A, B, and C. But it really is speed is the most important thing. So many times we used to say that victims, especially businesses, will have what we call a Super Bowl of finger pointing. Like, who's responsible? Are you responsible? Are you responsible? Who's responsible? Let's get our lawyers involved. By the time they sort all that stuff out, the money's long gone. And what's important to law enforcement is not who's responsible. Where did the compromise happen? It's we'll flush that out later if needed. It's not that. What it is get the money back, because again, after 24 hours, money's most likely going to be gone and not recoverable. Really, really bad. In an ideal scenario, it's a hold harmless agreement between financial institutions. Money goes back. In an extreme circumstance, the next case scenario would be an asset forfeiture, a civil judicial forfeiture, which will then gum up the return of the money for many, many months, but at least you'll get the money back. But again, speed is so important. So having a plan is one of the most important things, because it's fun that you run fast, but if you don't know where you're going, you're still lost. So having a plan in place prior to that bad day happening is critically important.
Parties whose conflict arises out of a funds transfer have to look at Article 4A and how to resolve these claims. Article 4A, and this is from the Uniform Commercial Code, essentially governs the rights and responsibilities of parties involved in electronic transfers. It's not only a big bank thing, it's even smaller financial institutions, corporate entities such as ourselves, high net worth individuals, and payment processors or aggregators. So it essentially is the rule, the federal law codified at the state level, that says if it's an electronic funds transfer, this is the law that governs the rights and responsibilities of the sender and the recipient, not only parties, but institutions involved. What's missing in that, and I'm not trying to indict the UCC, that was one of my favorite courses, was secured transactions in law school. It was a full year. Is that in a world of advanced social engineering, in a world of being tricked, the UCC really was meant to say, look, there was no concept of, well, somebody could be tricked and voluntarily be sending money to a fraudster, but they don't know it. That's not what the UCC was intended to protect in any manner, and you'll see this. It was intentionally providing a framework that as we move from a paper to an electronic form of money, essentially, and allowing more friction-free movement of money between corporate entities that you see here, can the banks, can the financial institutions releasing and receiving funds have a framework and a foundation to be able to build their systems and standard operating procedure without liability in the rear view catching up with them and having to change that in real time in the courts. Okay, and I'll get into this. But there's no mandate of account matching. So sender sends to, Acme Title, and the actual bank account number is going to John Doe. No account matching requirement at all in Article 4A. No duty to vet new account openings outside of Know Your Customer. So Know Your Customer is, are you a bad guy trying to open an account? Okay, if you are, then you're not going to open an account here. But it doesn't get into the intent of what the account is going to be used for. And there's no requirement to identify, monitor, or report any suspicious activity or anomalous behavior in any way. So where do we find ourselves here? We find ourselves in a gray area, or a rather opaque area. And that's never good for us as an industry, because we want clear dividing lines. Tell me what to do. I'll update my standard operating procedure and I'll execute against that. And I'll bring my insurance partners in to overlay that if we make a mistake, we still have coverage. That's our best case scenario right now. So what I think the takeaways that we found is, if you're a custodian of funds, if you're serving in an escrow capacity in any way, then there's likely a fiduciary responsibility that you could face. I don't want to talk about every jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions did dismiss cases where a consumer lost money and they didn't find fiduciary. Okay. But I think out of an abundance of caution and being more conservative, I think the best position would be, okay, we could get drug into more of an extended conversation.
So I think things that we can actually do today, in just a few minutes, especially if it costs little to nothing, are the things we should be focusing on, especially when it comes to online rep. The really powerful thing about having conversations about hard but really important things like wire fraud is, this is an opportunity for a title agent to be a hero, right? So if this title agent, lets their realtor, lender, and buyer seller, and this is what it looks like, this is the things to be aware of, these are the ways we're protecting you by partnering with somebody like Certified. When that person then sees one of those things happen, right? All of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, you literally saved me. So now you have a fan for life, but also someone who's like a disciple. You think they're not going to go around telling their family and their friends like, oh my gosh, I almost lost my life savings, but because I was working with this incredible group at XYZ, we closed on the house and they saved me. And so you've had this opportunity not only to serve another human in a really powerful and impactful way, like protecting them and being their superhero, but you've also created a client and a disciple for life who's never going to not talk about you.
If I was a crook, and having looked at crooks and how they behave, there are two things I need to do. Number one is contact. I've got to establish some line of contact. I can't do this without contacting you. So that's going to be by email, by phone. It could be through LinkedIn, through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through employees. So the first thing to think of is, if a malicious person wants to contact us, how will they do that? And how can we kind of educate our staff about the types of contact that might get made? But you've got to realize scammers are going to target people through their Facebook accounts, their WhatsApp numbers and so on. So just screening your email to try and spot scammers is not going to stop them. So that comes down to education of your staff. The second thing obviously I'm going to have to do is try and trick your staff into making a mistake. Again, how's that going to work out? What are the processes you've got in place for when payment details change, for checking payment details? Again, Certified feeds into this. But again, there's a public education, employee education thing here of employees just sort of thinking a bit like a scammer. It's quite uncomfortable territory, because what it forces you to do is to go into work and to see your workplace through a different lens. In the same way that a romance fraudster will develop a relationship with a victim, it's exactly the same thing with a corporate victim. They're going to scope out the company. They're going to know exactly where you're based, where all your offices are based. They're going to know all of your employees because they've looked through all of the LinkedIn profiles, and they're trying to do the same thing. Who's the vulnerable one? Who is the one in your organization who's A, got access to the money, B, working at maybe a bit more of a junior level? Don't want to go for the senior people. Maybe they might catch the scam out. No, you want to go for that, middle ranking person, and you contact them and you develop a relationship. with them. It's the same thing. You start working on them and you don't go straight in and say, hey, can you transfer the money to this new account? You say, oh, you know, you work in the accounts department. Can I speak to you about this particular thing? Oh, great. By the way, how are you today? All those tactics of relationship forming and getting somebody and understanding them and the long game they're playing, it's not just romance fraud victims they do this for, they will do this for your employees. So again, thinking about your organization as effectively a set of potential victims of this kind of grooming behavior might be an interesting way to go about it.
I think one of the real values of us to the whole real estate ecosystem is we see things before other people see them, right?
Yeah, for
We
sure.
know
Yeah.
things are coming and we elevate it and we get out on the front. And again, we don't have to do this, but we know it's the right thing to do. And we know everybody will benefit from that. So one of the things that was really clear to me was during the pandemic, you know, when deals weren't getting done and people were coming to us saying, how can we help you, right? The realtors and the bankers and what do you guys need? So it was clear, everybody knew our value. But again, it's like everything in the world. It's like, what have you done for me lately? So here we are again, right? Showing our value and demonstrating it. And by the way, if you look at all the costs on the closing, we are not the most. We're way down here, right? So we got to stand up for ourselves and punch above our weight and raise our voice and make sure people really do understand that and value that. So I do think, you know, I don't think the environment's going to change, but what I think has changed, and we have more work to do, is who we are and how we're talking about it. And that's really going to be the value. And we're expanding, you know, our reach on it.
The title industry is amazing and I'm so passionate about it and it doesn't feel like work and I've loved it every day that I've been in it. So thinking about how would I support myself if I had to go not do title? I wouldn't love the next thing that I do because I love title. I don't know that I could support myself other than being in title. And I'm 50 years old. You know, I'm in the middle of my life going, I might have to start over and the rug might just have been pulled out from under me. The peace of mind that I had and what kept me going is I have a little girl that needs someone to be strong and provide for her. And the support that the certified team provided, the support from my underwriter, the support from my team in digging in and how do we continue and not look back and say, oh, there's a problem and who made the mistake and pointing fingers. It was more, let's move forward and let's figure out where these little loopholes fall and let's put patches on them to make sure we're safe right now, but let's implement that team to make sure that these types of situations don't happen.
I have one question for you, Anthony, and one more for you, Joe, as we almost hit time here. Anthony, how do the rest of us avoid this?
So there's a few things, and this is, you know, hindsight is of course 20/20. I am not comfortable closing with somebody who is not physically present unless I already have an established attorney-client relationship with them. If it's somebody I've known for a long time that has happened to, you know, maybe move out of state or a client that I'm doing constant transactions for that's, you know, away on business or something like that. If you're not here, we're not closing. And if you're going to be leaving Connecticut, let's meet and pre-sign stuff before you go for everything that has to be done in person. And I'm going to get your ID, which, by the way, is not foolproof because I did get an ID from a guy named Daniel Koenigsberg. That was a foreign passport. Don't accept foreign passports. That's another one. Use certified to verify wire information. Because we ended up wiring to this guy, and as if you don't know, the name where you wire to and the account number do not need to match on the receiving bank end. The banks don't check that; they just check a routing number and an account number. If it exists, the wire goes through, and you're done. So learn that, and then let's see. What else? Don't trust realtors. No offense if anybody's a realtor here. You got to do your own verification. You can't rely on what other people give you. The realtor, really good guy, would close with him again if he referred me something, but I would verify who it was, you know, talk to the person, etc. But of course, this was very socially engineered and had a number of lovely conversations with a guy named Daniel Koenigsberg. there's really no hard and fast way, but when you're in vacant land, send a letter or something, being very careful to maintain attorney-client privilege to a verifiable address of record, such as a tax bill. Hey, verifying this ownership, something. We've done a few transactions since this where either the seller was not present, and I was on the buy side on one of them. But we were able to, I worked with seller's counsel who knew my story, and I told him, there's red flags all over this one. Let's make double sure that you don't want to go through what I'm going through now. It was happening in the thick of it. And we were able to successfully verify his client on a number of different platforms, and that transaction closed without issue.
I like that, and it's easy to get lost that, well, I'm not on the sell side, so who cares?
No, but
Like,
buyer's
you're gonna
attorney
get
got
drawn
sued on
into
this
it.
one too. So
Yep.
everybody got sued.
Joe, one question for you. So the
Sure.
all members of our respective state bars, right? Had this not settled, as part of the settlement, Dr. Kennensberg received quiet title judgment to expunge the fraudulent deed, essentially.
Correct.
Had that not settled, and maybe, and this is to you as well. I mean, let's put our legal hats on. No precedent for this that I could find nationally. One edge case about a foreclosure of a veteran that was deployed to Afghanistan during the crisis. And he ended up with the property. He ended up with a check, not the property. That was interesting. So who would have ended up with the house? Who would have ended up with the land?
You go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, we don't have a decision on this that we can point to with these facts, but I think I would lean towards the true owner. It's similar to something we occasionally see in title that we call like a rogue chain of title. That would sort of follow sort of the basic concept that you can't get good title from a place where title never existed. That would be sort of the basic reasoning. And we don't have a case, that would have these facts that we can point to. These are serious, severe claims that should be settled.
Yes.
It should be, no, I should say, should be avoided in the first place.
Oh, no,
But
I
if you wind up in one of these, settled. Yeah.
I understand. Andy, what would you say to that?
I echo Joe, basically for same reasoning, and remember from law school, real estate is unique, unlike goods, unlike money. I think that had this gone to trial, which would be 2 years from now, you'd have a judgment and so forth. I think the real owner would have Koenigsberg would have gotten the property back along with some probably damages to restore it in some way, and maybe something over and above that, I don't know. And then the buyer would have also gotten, dollar for dollar plus attorney's fees plus a lot, maybe over and above that. But fortunately, you had a lot of reasonable parties and a really great federal magistrate who knocked everybody's heads together, and we were able to settle the thing within a year of it being discovered.
Yeah. Recognizing we're over time, I'll close with this. Guys, thank you. Thank you. I've been wanting to have this conversation for now months once we set this up months ago. All of the situations we talked about today were preventable. We can see, right? We're armchair quarterbacking on a Monday morning, and it's easy to do. The verifying of identities, absolutely. Your vacant land, your non-owner occupied, I would dare say by next summer, standard practice will be we're just verifying all parties in a transaction, because identity theft and identity impersonation is really kind of the root cause at the end of the analysis of how these things take place. Verifying payoffs, like we heard from Sarah, every single time, every payoff going through Payoff Protect. Hard stop. We will administer the callback for you guys if we don't have the record. We are detecting fraud every single day, multiple times a day through that platform. It's so incredibly active. And then just having the insurance. So we also heard that there was nobody had insurance coverage, all the insurance. And I'm not speaking to Joe, I'm speaking to the E&O, the cyber. Nobody was there to say, oh yeah, great. You know, this is a perfect, situation where you have claims coverage. None of that. None of that. Because they're so heavily nuanced and the social engineering typically falls through a crack. So with certified, the direct insurance piece of it would pick up if our system fails to properly identify, or the payout protect solution properly or improperly fails to validate, and you rely upon that. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So with that, guys, thanks for hanging out. I suspected this might go a little bit long, but Joe, any last words? Anthony, any parting pieces of wisdom?
I guess just I would say we're all in this together. Lean on the resources that are out there that Certified has, your title insurance companies like Caddick. Lean on those resources. We all want to prevent these frauds.
And if anybody tries to rush you through something, tell them stop. No, I'm verifying it. I don't care. And if it takes an extra day or two, too bad.
Yeah. No, I love that.
That's another aspect of the fraudster tries to rush you. Don't believe it.
Yeah.
Do your homework. Practical advice.